Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the combat zone where the enemy has only 4 things to say. Abandon ship, bail out, take cover, and we surrender. And boy, have we got a show for you tonight. We've got all kinds of stuff on the plate, everything from local politics and politicians who, well, let's just say paper thin describes them, right up to international affairs. I'm Nick.
You just can't stay away from. You're like a moth around a flame when it comes to some local politicians.
It's just so easy.
I know.
Anyway, I'll get in to tell you all about that. My name's Nick Vandergraat. My co-host is Joseph Benamy. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome aboard. We certainly hope to make it entertaining and fun, as well as informative. And I tell you, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be an interesting night tonight, that's for sure, because there is always, as usual, plenty of things to discuss. Now, just to give you some idea of the things on the menu, in no particular order, we have Happy Meals, driverless cars, stupid politicians, the city of Ottawa's mayor. We're going to use him as an example. And we've got some fun things lined up. So we don't want to give away too much until we actually get to that. So anyway, there's a bunch of things on there. So put your seatbelt on, grab your favorite beverage, hot or cold, sit back, relax, text a friend.
Don't grab your favorite beverage until the first, like the bottom of the hour.
Well, yeah. Don't go anywhere until the bottom of the hour. Okay. Yes, okay. But unless you're texting a friend to come and join you and listen in.
Okay, so 2 things. First of all, if you want to join in the chat room, we usually have a lot of action in our chat room. So just click on the chat bubble in the live player online, and that will probably, if you haven't registered already, you may have to register. Doesn't cost you anything. It's just a question of making sure you're a real person and not some sort of a robot bot. What's the word? Crawler, robot. There's another one.
Spider.
Bot. Is it a bot?
Web spider.
A web bot.
A web crawler.
I don't know. Web crawler. I think that's it. Web crawler.
See, if I keep saying something long enough,
eventually
it makes sense.
Robots, bottom buttons, whatever they are. So make sure. The bottom line is make sure you're a real person, or in the words of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, that you're a bona fide member of people kind.
People kind. Absolutely.
People kind. That's it. You can also call in toll free anywhere in North America. 613. Oh, scratch that. I was about to give away my personal cell phone number there. That would have been disastrous. And anyway, and it's not toll free. Sorry about that, guys. 844-415-2115. That number again, 844-415-2115. Oh man, it's been a long day, and it's cold. Like
I was not
I know
ready.
I know we're sounding like a broken record, but. Please have some global warming? Here is November the 21st, and it's minus 17 outside here in Ottawa.
Which is cold on any scale.
It's cold.
Yeah, and I was not ready for winter to settle in already.
Right, and 6 or 7 inches of snow already.
Oh,
it's
man.
Crazy.
I was walking around downtown, as I normally do during the weekday, going from one place to another, and... Howdy, people
sure
kind
that's
Doug.
What you were doing there, Nick?
Well,
you were going from one place to another?
Yeah, I know it's hard to believe. I don't just walk in circles. One leg isn't longer than the other by much. But Doug just said, howdy, people kind. Howdy, people Doug. Anyway, now that's an interesting salute. Howdy, people Doug. All right. Anyway, the wind was swirling and the snow was flying. It felt like mid-February. It was just ridiculous. It was cold out there.
Okay, so here's a pet peeve of mine, Nick, and it's not on our list of subjects to talk about tonight.
Okay.
But is it February or February?
I think it's probably the harder one to say.
It's spelled February.
Yes.
But everybody says February, and I don't know whether or not that's just one of those English words that are pronounced differently than they're spelled, sort of like knife.
Yeah, it might be.
I cut my knee with a knife.
You cut your knee with your knife.
That's right. I was very conniving.
It's probably said the harder way, February.
Well, it's not hard for me to say February.
Yeah, but you actually have to think about it because it always comes out February.
No, it always comes out February for me. I always say February. That's the way I spell it. with an R, February.
You know
That's
what?
the way it's
When my
spelled.
teeth are chattering that hard in February, I don't care which
Anyway,
way it comes out.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. The bottom
right.
line is it's cold out there. It's cold out there, and we have, 6-7 inches of snow in some place, and now it's drifting tonight. And look, that's not real winter. I mean, we're used to real winter here, but okay, it is a little bit early.
Hey,
and
if you
can hear
live in
Nick coughing in the
Tuktoyaktuk,
background
it's
there
winter.
already.
Did
It's
you
winter.
know that my wife and I have been invited by the mayor of Tuktoyaktuk to come and visit?
No, I didn't know that.
You've been invited too. You just don't know it. It's actually an open invitation for all Canadians to go up and visit. There's a new stretch of highway
probably-
that connects the last town in the highway network to Tuktoyaktuk, and it took them a while to build it. It's a gravel road, 2 lanes wide, but for them, that's quite the thing. So,
And
my
for
wife
all you
and I-
listeners out there, if you Google ice road truckers, you'll know what we're talking about.
that's right. That's a job I don't want. Anyway, so
Let's start by talking about driverless cars, because
All
we
right.
touched on this a little bit last week, and we promised we'd discuss it this week, because there's it's a fantastic, interesting topic, because these things are coming. I know it sounds really futuristic, but robot vacuum cleaners were probably extremely futuristic at one point in time as well. And although I wouldn't call them ubiquitous by any stretch of the imagination, robot vacuum cleaners are plentiful out there now, and I've even been considering buying one for, my wife. Actually, I'd have to buy it for me, because the truth is I'm the one that does the vacuuming.
I
at
thought you were
least
going
on
to
the
replace
carpets.
her with no. That's not a good trade. I wouldn't do that.
What's that?
You're not replacing your wife with a robotic vacuum cleaner. You're getting one to make her job easier.
No, I'm getting one to make my job
Okay,
easier.
all right. I just want to be clear here. We're not replacing people with robots.
No, we're not replacing people. That's one of those things that technology is not displacing workers in this case.
But you know something?
I'd have to stand there with a beer supervising that robot vacuum
Hey,
cleaner
listen,
anyway.
you never know. It
Watching
might blow,
to make sure it does its
might
job.
blow a gasket, and if it does, you got to be there.
But driverless cars are there for real. And in Phoenix, Arizona, Nick, they have hundreds of these cars on the road now as a test sort of pilot project. And there's a whole slew of, I won't say unintended consequences, but a whole area of law and how you enforce the law, etc. And Nick's yawning already. He's going, I'm bored already. See, the problem is when I think about a driverless car, I automatically start to feel tired, because I'm going to fall asleep.
You want to have a nap.
Which is really hard. It's really crazy, because I am the world's worst passenger in a car. I'm not a backseat driver saying, okay, go left, go right, get in this lane, get in that lane. It's that kind of backseat driving I don't really do. Maybe a little bit. My wife is going to say I do it a lot, but the truth is I really don't.
Perception is everything.
But I'm a terrible, nervous, anxiety-ridden passenger. I mean, I cannot relax. But on the other hand, I cannot stay awake.
Oh man,
It's the ultimate. It's torture. See, if I get on a plane, the minute that engine starts revving up and we start to back away from the gate, it's like bang. It's almost like a
switch.
I suffer from narcolepsy, right? Where I'm in the middle of a
Sleep
sentence and
apnea.
all of a sudden, bang! There, I'm asleep. and I can, if it's not a long flight, Nick, I can literally sleep from the time we're pulling out to from the gate to the time we touch down, and that touchdown
that's what wakes you up.
wakes me up, unless it's a really good touchdown, in which case I can sleep through it. So on a plane, I can sleep no problem. On a train, oh my gosh, I just can't stay awake on trains. I cannot stay awake on a train. I'll open up my little tablet to start reading, and before I know it, I wake up and it's 3 hours later and I've missed my stop or something like that. Okay. So planes
They had a
and
song
trains.
about a guy who was stuck on a train, and every wife, I can't remember the name of it, but she would go down to the station every day with a lunch for him, and she'd hold it up because he didn't have the money to get off the train. I guess the writer of the song never wanted him to get off because she could have easily dropped enough money in the bag. Anyway, you got me distracted.
Whoever wrote that song never wrote a train because it's easy to get off when you don't have money.
Yeah, they tend to throw you off.
The hard part is staying on.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
anyway, the point is I have no problem sleeping on trains and I have no problem sleeping on planes. But sleeping in the passenger seat of a car when somebody else is driving, I
have the solution.
I cannot stay awake and I cannot fall asleep.
I have the solution for you.
I'm in this sort of twilight zone where I'm dozing off, and then the minute in the back of my mind, I hear the change lane, the direction light clicking.
Yeah, the blinker.
And all of a sudden, I don't just open my eyes, but I'm startled. And if we change lanes and I feel that sort of shifting to the side, back and forth, it's terrible. It's pure. All joking aside, it is torture for me.
So it's like a purgatory for you.
Okay, yeah, I know. You Catholics in purgatory, right?
I know. But I have the solution. Find yourself a carnival and go get one of those little airplanes with short, stubby wings, put a little 3.5 horse motor in it, put a bubble over top of it, and use that to drive around. Or put stubby little wings on your car, and you'll feel like you're flying. No?
I'm just trying to think about that.
Well, they have flying cars. And whoever can, something, we're getting a little bit more serious again. Whoever wants the keys to the kingdom of the world, all they have to do is perfect the flying car and make them for about $40,000 to $60,000 so that the average person can afford one. And when you can give people relief from gridlock and from traffic lights and stop signs, think about the rush to the market that would be. Now, everybody says, well, they just all be in the... Yeah, but do you know how big the sky is?
Well, the sky is pretty empty right now because everybody's driving their car on the ground, right?
Trust me, there's plenty of room up there.
That's really not that... There is plenty of room, but yeah, I don't think... Honestly, I think that we're all just a lot safer on the ground.
Well, you know what? Having that option, because they actually have a car right now. The thing is even electric, as much as I don't like electrically powered vehicles, just because I don't like, the reason they were created in the first place. They have these things that will do everything for you. They will take off, fly you to your destination, and land. They even come with a parachute. So should something happen, you deploy this, what's called a ballistic parachute, and it lowers the whole thing to the ground. Now, it's not like you land in a pillow. There's still quite a bump when you hit the ground, but it's a lot better than smacking into a bridge at 70 miles an hour when you're driving down the highway. So there is a real future for this stuff. And in that sense, I get excited about the advances when it comes to transportation. But a lot of this stuff with electric cars, or not, but driverless cars, you mentioned Phoenix, Arizona, where they have a lot of these test cars. Why don't they ever test them? And maybe they do. But to the best of my knowledge, they don't test them here in Ottawa. Because can you imagine the chaos that would have reigned? Yesterday was bad enough on the highways with people with brains in their car. Now, some people leave their brains in the garage when they get in their car. There's no doubt about that. But in general, you've got, cognizant, lucid human beings in the car adjusting to the driving conditions as you go along. Can you imagine a pilotless car or a driverless car out there in the snow yesterday when none of the sensors work? The ground's covered with snow. It's greasy. It's a mess. And no matter what you do, you got to creep along. No, it would have been a disaster.
Well, I'm not going to question that. I think that there really are problems with the driverless cars. And getting back seriously on topic here, one of the things that they have noticed in Phoenix, and one of the questions that's out there is, how do you enforce parking regulations?
That's another good question.
So that's a big deal, because apparently these cars can actually park, and there's some way that their sensors work that they know where the parking, where they're allowed to park, where they're not allowed to park, etc. But who pays for the parking, and more importantly, who pays the fine for parking illegally? So that's one question, and I suppose that's that's actually not a difficult question, because I suppose you could treat them the same way you treat a car that is being driven by somebody. I mean, you put a ticket on the car, and the owner of the car actually is responsible for paying that parking violation, regardless of whether or not they were the ones that were driving it and parked it in the first place. So you could work around the parking thing that way with a driverless car. You just put a ticket on it, and whoever owns the car, regardless.
Then you could argue that if I'm not in the vehicle, if I'm not the one parking it, how can you hold me accountable?
Well, it's a fair question, but I'm assuming that there's been a lot of case law on that very question, because that's an argument that you would make anyway, because, I own a car. If one of my kids gets in the car and they park illegally and then they don't give me the ticket, or they don't pay the ticket and pay it, the fine comes to me. Or if I lend you my car, Nick, and you park illegally, the fine comes to me. I can't then just simply go to court and say, well, I wasn't driving it, so I'm not responsible for the fine.
Yeah,
I mean, there must have been a lot of cases like that already, because it just seems like a natural defense.
Yeah.
But more importantly is what happens if the driverless car, for whatever reasons, actually makes a driving violation, a moving violation. They turn right when they're against not against a red light, but I mean, I'm sure they have a way of sensing red lights. So, but
how good are they obeying traffic signs?
Well, and more importantly, how good are they at sensing and obeying temporary traffic signs that may be up due to construction or detours, etc. So, whatever. How do you pull them over? Okay, so you have a cop coming behind them with his lights flashing and he's got his siren going or whatever. So does the driverless car sense that, pulls over, and then the window rolls down, and now how do the cop walks up to the car, but there's nobody driving it, right?
Yeah.
But presumably there's a passenger in it, but you're not going to ask the passenger for his driver's license and registration.
Well, this
and
is
insurance, right? So these are questions.
They are, and they're very. I think they're very legitimate from I want to say a legal point of view, because the Highway Traffic Act is a law. You have all kinds of issues yet to be hammered out, and I have no doubt that as time progresses, they will come to answers on this thing. Whether I like it or not, driverless cars are part of the future, and part of the reason I have a real burn to get my pilot's license, and part of the motivation is I don't want to be part of that crowd. I want to stay in control of when I go, where I go, and how I go. And when you surrender yourself to a driver, because what's the difference between a driverless car, other than the fact that there's a human being at the wheel, and a city bus? I mean, you are no longer in control of where you go, when you go, and how you go. And those are three big W's that I don't want to surrender. Call me, old-fashioned, call me whatever you want to.
Sorry, say that again.
Well, if you...
How you go, where you go, and when you go?
Yes.
That's two W's and an H.
I knew that. I was testing you.
Did I pass?
Obviously.
See, now that's like a driverless car, right?
Yeah, but you can say the same thing about transit, public transit. For the same reasons I don't like public transit. Like this morning, 6:30 in the morning, out of the transit at the bus stop. The wind's howling around your ankles. It's cold. And you're standing there waiting for somebody else to come along and let you get on that vehicle so that at their convenience, they can take you where you want to go. Now, they have scheduled routes, and when I say their convenience, I don't mean that they're, the driver's just sitting back having a Coke and a bag of chips or something. He's got a job to do, and he's doing it. But that's what I mean is it's not at your convenience; it's at the city's discretion. Might be a better way to put it. So for personal freedom reasons, I am not interested in getting involved in driverless cars. Okay. I would rather fly or stick with my old 5-speed and that kind of car.
So here's the other thing with the driverless cars, though, Nick. Okay, and that is that what happens if they're in an accident? Just a little fender bender.
Yeah.
So these are problems, and there are virtually no laws written around any of this stuff.
And of course, machines never break down, never make a mistake. It's like the first time I got on a fully automated air flight in an airliner. There was a mechanical voice came over the speakers and said, "Welcome to I think, what was it? Pterodactyl Air, that was it. Pterodactyl Air's first fully automated flight. All features of this flight are designed for your safety, and trust us, nothing can go wrong. Go wrong. Go wrong."
Oh, dear, oh, dear.
You know, of course things can go wrong. So go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead, Nick.
I'm just saying that it's going to take a long time, I think, at least in my case, to win my confidence to be able to put my trust in these things.
Well, I honestly, I'm going to feel the same way. I'm not there yet, although I'm very intrigued by the idea of a driverless car. And, you know, I've mentioned this before, so it's not a secret. I have, you know, some visual problems, and it's likely that at some point in time I'm not going to be able to drive because of my eyesight problems.
Right.
And so, you know, how does one get around? Because it's all very nice, you know, like the green beanies, not the green beanies. Sorry, lol. Sorry. But the green, you know, well, the green fascists, let's call them what they are, okay? The people that want to eliminate private cars and force everybody to take public transit, or better yet, ride bikes in the dead of winter when it's, you know, like tonight, even though it's only November, minus 17 and, you know, 6 or 7 inches of snow out there. And by the way, bicycles in the wintertime, I know there are people that are listening and go, "Oh, that sounds like a good idea." There are one or two of you out there, I'm sure, that think that's a good idea. I'm telling you, okay, in a place like Ottawa, riding your bike in the wintertime on the road is a bad idea. I don't care if you can get around, okay, although it's got to be a real challenge getting around when there's snow on the ground on your bike on the road, but you are a danger to yourself and to people around you. It is a bad, bad, bad idea. Did you hear me, Nick?
I think you
Did
said
catch
something about
that?
being a bad idea.
Just in case people didn't get that.
Yeah.
It's a bad idea. Bad idea.
Well, I've always, and I don't want to go down this road too far, but I always felt that bicycles are meant as recreational, occasional transportation. They're not supposed to replace cars.
This is Canada. If you live in a big city where the population density is you know, fairly substantial,
high,
right? And there is good public transit, and you don't want to own a car because you either walk to your work or you take public transit to your work, that's fine. Great. Yep. I give you a pat on the back. Good for you. Personally, if my circumstances allowed me to do that, I think I kind of like it. I like the idea of not having to own and maintain a car, but I'd still have a driver's license, and I would still, you know, on weekends rent a car and go away. You can't get around this country without a car. You can get around some cities without a car, but you can't get around the country without a car. And people don't realize that, especially when they talk about Europe. They go, well, look, or Japan. They're doing it in Japan. I'm going, Japan, Germany, France, these countries are double, treble, quadruple, and in the case of Japan, let's see, 10, 30 or 40 times the population in a territory that's a fraction of the size. Everybody is pushed in and crowded together.
Right.
So public transit works there in a way that's far more sensible and effective than it would be here. But this is way off topic. I mean, the bottom line is this. Driverless cars are coming. You can't uninvent these things. And I know you're thinking, you know, the Jetsons sort of futuristic thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see that ever happening. But
maybe not in the way that, like, the Jetsons might be a poor analogy or poor image to use, but something along that line, something that allows us that kind of freedom is coming. What it's going to look like, I don't know.
Well, I don't know either, but it certainly would be I don't know.
Well, I don't think they'll even have a
Interesting.
Spacely Sprockets when that's available.
A what?
Spacely Sprockets. That's where George Jetson used to work.
Is that where he used to work?
Spacely Sprockets.
See, I didn't know that.
Hey, man, you're talking 1960s cartoons. Of course I know this stuff. We were watching, I was showing my kids some of the theme songs of some of my favorite cartoons when I was a kid, and my favorite is still the Mach 5 and Speed Racer. Anyway, don't want to go down that road.
What was that? Oh, no, hang on. What was that cartoon?
That was about Speed Racer and his little monkey.
Was that the name of the cartoon?
Speed Racer, yeah. And his car was called the Mach 5.
I was a Fireball XL5.
Really?
Yeah.
There's nothing cooler than, I'm sorry, there's nothing cooler than Speed Racer than the Mach 5. The Mach 5 could do anything.
You know what we have to do? We have to do a show dedicated to Get Smart.
Did you know that the guy who
And
played...
Hogan's Heroes.
Oh, my God, Hogan's Heroes. Brilliant. You know what? As
I
silly
knew this
as it is...
Okay, the floodgates are open. Here we go.
As silly as that show is, it's brilliantly written. It's brilliant. There's a kind of humor built into that show. But before I go on, Adam, what was the name of the actor who played Get Smart? Adam, come on, you should.
Don Adams.
Don Adams.
Right.
Did
I had
you
to think
know
about
he
that for a
voiced
second.
a cartoon character? It was a penguin and had a walrus as a sidekick.
I didn't know that, and it doesn't surprise me.
And I'm trying to remember the name of it. I'm
picturing
Tennessee
it.
Tuxedo. That was it.
What was it?
Tennessee Tuxedo.
Tennessee Tuxedo.
Yep. And they would
Okay,
go.
yeah.
Yeah, he was always trying to either his home base was the zoo. That's why the walrus was there. Anyway,
Okay.
that's besides the point.
That sounds a little bit like Magilla Gorilla.
Yeah, there was that one too.
But Magilla Gorilla was a
Great
pet
Babe.
shop, I think, wasn't it? Mr. Was it Mr. Peabody or Mr. Peebles?
Peabody.
Peabody or
And
Peebles?
don't
I
forget the
remember.
other one. You also had Mr. Magoo.
Well, Mr. Magoo, yeah, well, he was just blind.
Yeah, I know, but that made him hilarious because he'd get in and out of trouble and never know he was there.
Yeah, that is
That
true.
was the shtick of the whole show. So, oh man, we can.
How did we get onto this stuff? Driverless cars. You
Driverless
see,
cars.
Maybe it's because it's so futuristic.
There's a
that
longing.
we
You know
can't
what
do
it
that.
is? Cars. There's on a deeper, again, going back a little more seriously. Cars bring with them. They're the ultimate symbol of personal freedom. Because in a car, you go anywhere, right? Anywhere there's a road, you can go in our culture. And it symbolizes the height of technological advance. It symbolizes a personal freedom again. The ability to travel anywhere you want to go. Like if you want to go visit, in your case, your family relatives down in the northeastern United States, get in your car and go. If I want to go and visit friends in Saskatchewan, get in my car and go. Might take me a while. The nice thing about living in Saskatchewan is you can watch your dog run away from home for 3 days. But you know, it's that. And when I see people surrendering that kind of individual freedom to join the masses on public transit, individually I can't criticize them, but I don't like the trend.
How do you watch your dog run away for 3 days?
Because it's that flat.
Because it's that. Oh! You're talking about the prairie.
Yeah,
okay, I got
Saskatchewan.
it. All right, I'm a little slow on the uptake tonight, guys. What can I say?
My place, you can't watch him for 15 minutes. 5 minutes, he's gone.
Yeah, well, 5 minutes, 5 seconds, he's gone, Nick.
Actually, yeah. He gets into the bush and he has fun, I'll tell you.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, we're having too much fun, but we're going to take a short break, and we will be back very, very soon. Don't go away.
All right.
Okay, we're back in the combat zone. I'm Joe. He's Nick.
That's me.
And I was trying to think of that line, but I'm not even going to try because every time I do it, I get tongue-tied. I don't know what it is, Nick, because I don't have,
hard.
As you know, I do not have stage fright.
No. No. Joseph's afraid of some things. I haven't figured out what they are, but being on stage is not one of them.
Yeah. Well, I just want to go back to what we were talking about before. I don't know if it's fair to say that I'm afraid of being a passenger in a car driven by somebody else, but it's as close to fear and terror as I experience in my life. So there it is. So, okay. So why don't you tell us about, we're trying not to make this show too local. Right. Because we have an international audience and a lot of listeners and participants from the United States, et cetera. So we try to keep it, the focus, national,
but
transnational, international, stick to conservative principles that are broad, et cetera. But every now and then something comes up where we just have to get a little bit local. So for those of you out there who are not from Ottawa, bear with us because it's entertaining. So, yeah, Nick, I'm going to let you take over here.
Okay, well, first of all, for you in the international audience, if your mayor is not doing things like this, you're okay. You're in good shape. The mayor of Ottawa is a man by the name of Jim Alexander Watson. He's been mayor for 3 consecutive terms. He leans left of center a lot and has what appears to be what some might call a mighty thin skin. Now, look, I used to be on terrestrial radio here in the city of Ottawa, and I was there for 13 years. So there's no secret. Anybody who knows me and knows about my previous life on the radio, on the air, knows that there's no love lost between Jim Watson and myself.
Jim Watson being the mayor of Ottawa.
That's right. Anyway, and as a I won't call myself a journalist. I was an on-air verbal editorialist because I was paid for my opinion on current affairs. That's what my whole job was, and to get people to respond to that opinion and call in, and how radio stations work. So a lot of times when he did something, and this was true of any mayor that was in office while I was on the air. I was there for 13 years. That meant I think we were under about three different mayors. There was Bob Chiarelli, Larry O'Brien, and Jim Watson. Now, Jim's been the longest serving of the 3 of them. Anyway, so I would often criticize Mr. Watson for his policies.
Well, let's say critique.
All right.
It just sounds more, I don't know, sophisticated.
Yeah, well, okay. That would be wonderful because that certainly fits the bill. So what I'm saying is that he recently on Twitter, and I have discovered the power of Twitter in all of this, and I because I was never a big Twitter fan before. I come kicking and screaming to technology very slowly over time. And it's like I was one of the last people I know to get a cell phone. I was still using smoke signals and wet blankets, to communicate with people outside my immediate reach. I'm being a little facetious, but not much. I just wasn't much into technology other than laptops, computer games, that kind of thing. And so anyway, on Twitter the other day, he had posted a video, and he was crowing about the success and what a wonderful thing this light rail transit system that he took credit for was doing such a wonderful job. And I mentioned to him that, maybe this wasn't the best idea, that there are other ways he could have improved transit, like putting a bridge over the river. And you'd have to know and I'm being a little bit vague here because, if you don't live in Ottawa, these things won't mean anything to you. But one of the big problems we have in this city is we have trucks in the downtown core that if someone would put a bridge over the river on the west end of the city could get the trucks off and take a large burden off the traffic downtown.
Right. But this public transit, this light rail transit, or what is it, LRT? What does the T stand for? Transit?
Yeah.
Light rail transit. That's a pet project of his. He worked on it for a long time.
It's the only thing he focuses on.
And it's moving along towards completion.
It's getting there
someday.
And it's the thing is, he's saying, he was fond of saying for a while, on target and under budget. Well, no, wait a minute. The project's over almost 5 years old now. It's been delayed 3 or 4 times, so it's not.
And it's a year. It was supposed to be. It's open. It's a year late now, isn't it?
Well, we don't even have an opening date.
Well,
yet.
They promised that it would be online
by November.
In November,
right?
Well, here we are in November. It's nowhere near close. And I heard recently they were talking about 6 months to a year.
Well,
longer.
The last time I heard anything, it was sometime in April.
Right.
So
that would be the 6-month target. Anyway, I'm not defending it. Of course, that's way behind schedule.
Of course it is, and this isn't the first time that gold line has been moved. So I said, wouldn't doesn't putting in ring roads and dealing with traffic downtown, and taking we have 2 sets of buses, one from across the river and the other our own set running in the downtown core. Getting rid of those problems might have been a better idea, don't you think? Well, he hit the roof, and he. He criticized my radio show, called it wacky, and I don't care. The point is about whatever I do in the media, you're never going to please everybody, okay? So some people are going to think you're nuts. Some people are going to think you love them, or they love you, and it doesn't matter what you say. Either way, and that's what you want. You want a balance. Because the only conversation you ever have is one where everybody in the room agrees with you, it's a mighty boring conversation.
Well, it's Jim has got a thin skin. Let's put it that way. And he never, to the best of my knowledge, he has never come across a critical tweet that he feels he shouldn't respond to somehow or other. So that's our mayor, Jim Munson.
So here's the tweet I put out. Okay. And just found it, and here it is. Good thing it's on time and under budget, right? Oh, wait, sorry. It's about 4 years late and millions over budget. Not to mention too big for a city this size. Ring road, truck-only bridges, and public transit transfer stations make a lot more sense. Well, here's what he responded, just so you have some reference, okay? This is the mayor of Canada's capital. Now, personally, I haven't been on the radio in the traditional terrestrial sense in 4 years.
Well, but you are in the combat zone.
I'm online.
You're in the combat zone, Nick.
Yes, I am.
So don't sell yourself short.
I'm not, but I'm saying that as far as having listened to me every day.
I get it.
Okay. I've changed venues. Okay, so.
Hold it. You're going to quote him now?
I'm going to read what he wrote.
Oh, wait, just a second. Hang on just a second. We have to channel our inner Jim Watson.
Oh, right.
Okay, so let's. Okay, just a second. Be patient. Make sure we get the right ambiance. Okay.
All right. So with this calming effect playing in the background, we want Jim, I hope he's listening, to understand we want him to relax and be at peace, be at one with himself.
Okay, so what did Jim have to say? And
Jim had to say, and I'll try to say it gently, so I don't disturb his yin and his yang or whatever the thing and the thang are. Okay? He said, I see you have as many followers as you had listeners on your wacky radio shows. And then he says, CFRA Ottawa made the right choice when they axed your show. Okay, well, if he'd left it at the first line, no problem. I can take it. I'm a big boy. I got thick skin. After raising 8 kids, you have thick skin. You have to. And being on radio for 13 years, not everybody's going to like every word you say. So you have to have a lot of calluses.
Yes.
But then he decided to make it personal. Now, I didn't react. A lot of people weren't very happy with Mr. Watson because he made it personal. And they decided that they would let him know how unhappy they were. And this has been going on for over 24 hours, and the list of responses just keeps growing. So it's unfortunate that he took that route. I would like to invite him to the show, by the way, if he's listening, so we can sit down and talk about transit in an adult way, so that we can discuss why the choice was made to put in a glorified trolley, which is what this thing is. It's 100-year-old technology with a fresh paint job. It's got overhead wires, all that stuff. And if you're listening, just send me a note to thecombatzone.ca. That's our website, our email address, right?
It's comments
Comment
at thecombatzone.ca.
Right.
Comments at thecombatzone.ca. But you know what? I think we're going to set up a new email address. We'll
Just for
call
him?
it the Gym Zone. So this may be a weekly section.
It could be.
On municipal, we have stupid politicians. Maybe we should just have overexcitable municipal politicians.
Yeah. It's possible because it's surprising.
Jim, relax. Chill out. Just relax.
It would be fun.
Take a pill. Smoke some of that weed. It's legal in Canada, you know.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Kick back in your office. Put your feet up. You're not doing anything anyway.
Okay. All right.
So that's what was going on. Now, more than this, though, there is actually something serious to discuss here. The fact that somebody who hasn't been on the air in 4 years elicits such a visceral response tells me that I really wonder if there was a real emergency in this city, how would he react? Like, let's say we had some kind of terrorist attack, okay, or a natural disaster, an earthquake. We are on an earthquake fault line. So what if we had a 6 or a 7 on the Richter scale? If he can't handle this without losing his cool, what would happen then?
It's a fair question.
I thought so.
And all I can recommend is that, Jim, just chill out. Just relax, man. Take a pill. Massage your temples. Okay? You have
We
to
still
do
love
something.
you.
You've heard, I know, you've heard of restless leg syndrome. Jim,
Yes.
I think you have restless thumb syndrome. Anyway, what are you going to do, right? Okay, speaking about stupid politicians.
Yes, it is that time.
We're not talking about you, Jim. Just stay relaxed. Okay, you know what that means. It is time for our Stupid Politician of the Week. And, there's so many things to choose from. And I'm driving down the road on the way to our secret studio in our undisclosed location in our bunker this afternoon. And I hear these comments, and I'm just trying to think of how I should set this up. And maybe I should just play the clip. I'm going to set it up. So Barack Obama has a foundation, the Obama Foundation, and he was recently, I don't know if it was this weekend, it might have been this past weekend, they had a conference in Chicago with a number of young activists, and they were talking about all kinds of issues. And President Obama, let's show him the respect that's due to the fact that he was the president of the United States. So President Obama has a one-on-one sit-down with an author where, they have these conversational things. It's becoming kind of all the rage of these conferences. You sit in your easy chairs, and then it's sort of a Q&A thing, and it's unscripted, presumably. I hope if this was unscripted, okay?
If it wasn't.
Okay, so among other things, it was about an hour-long conversation, but they touched on climate change. And so I'm going to go ahead and play this clip now.
Climate change, we're going to have to come up with some new technologies to solve the problem as much as we need to. Although even on something like that, right now I could take off-the-shelf existing technologies. We could reduce carbon emissions by, let's say, 30%. Without any, it's not like we'd all have to go back to caves and, live off, fire.
Okay, let's hang on just a second. Hang on. I just want to make sure everybody understood that, okay? Thank goodness we're not going to have to relax, Nick. Okay?
I'm so relaxed. I'm going to fall off my chair. Hey, God forbid we go back to caves and fire.
Nick's so excited by this. Okay, so hang on a second. It gets better. Now, I don't know how we get onto this, but hang on a second.
And smartphones and all that stuff, which would buy us probably another 20, 30 years for that technological breakthrough that's necessary.
Okay, so we're going to play the clip again in its entirety, but I just want to make sure that before we go back and do that so that everybody gets smoothly, I'm just going to point out that somehow or other we've jumped from we don't have to live in caves and we still get to keep our smartphones. And our smartphones are going to buy us 20 or 30 years of breathing space or whatever before we develop new technology. I'm not really sure how any of that, I don't know what any of that meant, to be perfectly honest with you. But now, okay, we'll go on. Hang on.
Sorry. The reason we don't do it is because we are still confused, blind, shrouded with hate, anger, racism, mommy issues. Yeah, I mean, we are fraught with stuff, and so if that's the case, then the single most important thing that we have to invest in is not all. And look, I'm a huge supporter of science and technological research and social science and evidence-based learning and all that good stuff. People call me Spock for a reason. I believe in reason and logic and all these Enlightenment values. But the thing that really we have to invest in is people.
Okay, we got Nick's just out of control in the background. Okay. So let's first of all, I just want to say this. Okay, I've heard a lot of
oh my God,
incoherent, impossible to understand things from Donald Trump. And usually people ridicule him and make fun of him all across the political spectrum, and he says things that are difficult to follow. This is easily rivals anything that I've ever heard Donald Trump say.
This makes Trump look like a
Okay, so let's understand this. Okay, first of all, the first thing is, and by the way, this is this is what he said, okay? This is not made up. This is not a Barack Obama impersonator. This is him talking about climate change. And first of all, we have the technology now to take off the shelf and reduce climate emissions. And what he's talking about, of course, is carbon dioxide emissions by 20 to 30% or whatever.
Where does he get his numbers?
I don't know where this comes from. And we don't... And okay, good thing. We don't. Guess what? We don't have to go back to living in caves and fire with campfires and stuff like that to achieve it. We can still keep our smartphones, and that'll buy us 20 or 30 years. And as if that's not bad enough, and I'm going to play the clip again. But if that's not bad enough, Nick, then he explains why we are not doing what he's just said, whatever it is, on climate change. in order to alleviate climate change. And he explains, because of anger, racism,
mommy issues,
and of course, mommy issues. Okay, so we have to play this again. So we're going to play the whole clip again, uninterrupted. Okay, just listen in.
Climate change, we're going to have to come up with some new technologies to solve the problem as much as we need to. Although even on something like that, right now I could take off-the-shelf existing technologies. We could reduce carbon emissions by, let's say, 30%. Without any, it's not like we'd all have to go back to caves and, live off, fire. We could have electricity and smartphones and all that stuff, which would buy us probably another 20, 30 years for that technological breakthrough that's necessary. The reason we don't do it is because we are still confused, blind, shrouded with hate, anger, racism, mommy issues. We are fraught with stuff, and so if that's the case, then the single most important thing that we have to invest in is not all. And look, I'm a huge supporter of science and technological research and social science and evidence-based learning and all that good stuff. People call me Spock for a reason. I believe in reason and logic and all these Enlightenment values. But the thing that really we have to invest in is people.
Okay. I'm not going to play the clip again because I'm afraid that I'm going to have to rush Nick to the hospital.
You know what
He's
never
going to have an
occurs to him?
aneurysm or a stroke or something.
What never occurs to him, and I find absolutely what's killing me about that whole thing is the Spot comment. That's not necessarily a compliment.
Okay, but who calls
Nobody.
him Spock? I have never heard this before. President Spock. If somebody called him Spock, can you imagine the outrage that would have precipitated
well,
in the press?
What? Having said that, if you give him pointy ears, he actually does look like Leonard Nimoy as Spock.
You think? Well, I don't know.
Give him pointy ears.
Oh my goodness!
And make his hair
gracious.
black instead of gray like it is now. And you're looking at Leonard.
I'm a big believer in science
and all that stuff. People don't call me Spock for nothing. Yeah, they do.
Mommy issues.
Oh my! And the numbers. Where does he get the numbers? 30%. I could reduce it by 30%.
But no, I want to say okay, but so we can take technology off the shelf.
Well, then do it
right now, and reduce emissions by 30%. And we don't even have to go back to caves and fire and living with fire. We can keep our smartphones and electricity, and that'll buy us the 20 or 30 years or 40 years that we need for that technological breakthrough. And I'm thinking, what technological breakthrough? You just said that we had it on the shelf, that you were going to take it off the shelf. I mean, the whole statement was completely incoherent.
This is what happens when his prompter dies on him.
I've heard that said. He was the teleprompter president. That he had
absolutely.
He had to be scripted all the time.
And this is why, because when you let him off his leash, he comes out with stuff like this.
Now, but people are going to hate me saying this. I know that, but I'm going to point out that, again, Donald Trump is a little bit like this, okay? When he goes off script, he can go a little incoherent and stuff like that.
But you expect that out of him.
Well, this is the thing: we treat Donald Trump so differently than we treat Barack Obama. I cannot understand. It's just beyond me, Nick. It really is.
I agree with you, of course, but at the same time, out of Trump, you've known this since before the election. He's always been like this, and when he does this, people aren't surprised. because this is who Donald Trump is. Obama was supposed to be pardon the phrase, the great white hope, right? Or the idea that he was going to be our savior, and I'm the change your mama promised to talked about, and all that kind of nonsense. And you find out not only is he not the great hope of the salvation of man, he's no smarter than the average guy walking down the street. He can, take away the teleprompter, and he sounds like some guy who's had 3 too many at the bar.
Well, he sounds like someone with mommy issues.
Yeah, obviously. Oh, my good Lord.
Okay, well, that's our Stupid Politicians section for this week, guys.
I'm glad that's over. I couldn't
You're going to have
more.
You will not be able to do sit-ups for at least 3 days, Nick, because your stomach muscles are going to be really sore from all that, deep
what?
belly laughter.
Oh, it's just unreal that anybody. They don't call me Spock for nothing. Maybe they do.
Who calls him Spock?
Nobody. It's just
I've never heard that before.
This is one of those throwaway phrases.
People would be afraid to call him Spock because, again, as I said, imagine the outroar, the outrage that calling Barack Obama Spock when he was president would have precipitated. People would have been crying racism. I don't get him.
He's just not that bright. And it's got nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with what's between his ears. There isn't much there. Because if you're the president of the United States, you're supposed to be the best your country has to offer.
I heard that he gets $400,000 an hour for a speech.
I wouldn't pay him $4.
No, but I heard that Michelle Obama only gets $250,000 per hour.
Oh, well.
So there's a little bit of a gender equity gap there.
Yeah, funny how it doesn't. They don't seem to get upset about that in that particular case. But why do people pay these past presidents like Bill Clinton $250,000 for a speech? What?
He's a great speaker, though. I have to tell you, I've seen
I don't
Bill Clinton.
care. I would not walk across the street and hear that man call out the time.
But he is. He's a very good speaker. I hear what you're saying, but I've heard him now a couple of times live, and he is the real deal. Look, we're going to take a break. It's the top of the hour, so get out there, stretch your legs, grab a refreshment, and we'll be back in a couple minutes.
All right, welcome back to the Combat Zone, folks, where the enemy only has 4 things to say. Abandon ship, bail out, take cover, and we surrender. Okay, hour number 2, straight ahead. And just as a parting shot at our good friend, Mr. Barack Obama, we have our own version of someone who can't talk when there's no teleprompter in front of them. And I wonder, if you can think of who I'm, talking about. It's, of course, I'm referring in a very gentle, kind, loving way, because we have this vibe going tonight about peace and love and harmony, where we don't want to disturb anybody with thin skins. Towards our prime minister, of course, our used sock salesman. I mean, our highly esteemed, glorious leader with the perfect hair. So he's another one that can't string 3 words together without putting an or an or some other useless word in the middle of it all.
Okay, before we go on, I just want to remind our listeners that if you want to join into the conversation live, you can do so toll-free anywhere in North America. Our phone number is 844-415-2115, or you can join in the chat room by clicking on the chat bubble on the live player online. If you have to register, do so. Not a problem. It's just to make sure that you're not a robot, that you're a real person, a real human being, part of the tribe of humankind, People kind.
People kind. Yes.
People kind.
Let's get it right. Come on. We've been scolded about this.
Costs you nothing. Just register and join in. So that number again, 415-2115, area code 844, or join us in the chat room by clicking on the chat bubble. Register if you have to register, or just sign in, and we'd love to hear from you. So when are parents not parents? And, on this show, we've talked quite a bit over the past while. From time to time, I guess, we've talked about the government usurping the role of parents, refusing to honor their wishes, undermining their authority in so many areas, particularly in the area of education. So the reason I raised this issue is because it's by way of introduction into the next topic, and that is a class action lawsuit that's been launched by a parent in Montreal against McDonald's. And the problem he has with McDonald's is that he thinks that they're violating the law, and they may well be, by the way, against advertising directed towards children. And the problem he has is with the Happy Meal, because as we all know, McDonald's has this Happy Meal that is particularly designed for children, and Happy Meals have little toys in them. I understand. I've never had a Happy Meal. I've never bought a Happy Meal. I've never seen a Happy Meal.
I don't need a meal to be happy.
Okay. I don't need Happy Meals to be happy. And I wouldn't have Happy Meals anyway, because, I only eat kosher food, being Jewish. But this guy, he's so upset that he's decided to sue, and they're looking for now people to join in this class action suit. He wants to turn it into a class action suit. And as I say, it could very well be that McDonald's is breaking the law in Quebec that prohibits advertising directed to children on radio and television. I don't recall what the age is. I think it's for 12 years and under or whatever. And so, as I say, the McDonald's may end up having broken the law. But I guess what this is, to me, is an illustration of the other side of the parental authority equation. We're always talking about how government is usurping the role of parents and interfering with parents who want to raise their children the way they want to raise their children, discipline them the way that they feel is appropriate within, reasonable limitations, and deciding what kind of education they're going to have, what courses they should have, how they should be taught. Basically, all of the things that come along with parenthood and families. And we're always defending the parents and standing up for their rights, Nick. And we will continue to do so.
Of course.
But here's a case where a parent, and I suspect that this I think as a father, I suspect that he's not alone, that there are a lot of parents out there who are going to go, even if they're not going to sign on to this class action lawsuit, who are basically saying, and this is the crux of the suit, it's not that they are allegedly breaking the law, that is to say McDonald's. It's that by allegedly breaking the law, they're making his job as a parent that much more difficult, because his children, he goes to McDonald's apparently a couple of times every week or every 2 weeks. And apparently his children are just giving him a hard time because they want Happy Meals, because they want to have those toys.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind about this gentleman, and I had his name here a second ago.
Not important. The name isn't important.
Okay, well, it's
in the story. You posted on your Facebook page?
Yeah. Anyway, the father in question here, there's a couple of reasons. There may be, because it doesn't mention how much the class action lawsuit there is for. It could be a simple token amount of $1.
Right, it could be.
Or it could be for millions. We don't know.
Don't know yet. Too early.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's set greed aside as a motivator.
In Canada, you don't get these lawsuits. Don't generate a lot of money.
Okay, so for the sake of this discussion, let's lay greed aside.
Okay. I'm perfectly willing to do that.
Yeah, because I'm not sure that that's the case. I know in certain jurisdictions that may be the case, but I don't think this is one of them. So anyway, what's really going on, let's see. The father of 3 young children says he eats at McDonald's about once every 2 weeks on the urging of his children. Okay, well, first of all, who's the adult in this equation?
Well, that's my point exactly.
Well, I'm just backing it up because if you've got, it doesn't say how old the children are. They're supposed to be under 13. So let's say they're 8 and 10, okay? 8, 10, and 6. You know what? If an 8, 10, and 6-year-old can manipulate you into feeding them whatever they want to eat, then you're not the adult they are. Because that's your role as a parent to decide what your kids are going to eat and when. And I don't want to sound like a stone out of the Stone Age, but when I was growing up, going to McDonald's.
You used to live in a cave with a campfire, didn't you?
And we even had, who do you think did the first finger paintings?
This was before, just ladies and gentlemen, this was before we discovered man-made climate change.
Oh, yes, way before.
This is the pre-man-made climate change discovery era.
Oh, it goes back to the point.
But I digress.
Yes, you do, because we actually invented stone tablet writing with bones and flint and all that stuff. Anyway, the point I'm making is that when I was growing up, my mother would make a meal, and you had 2 choices: eat it or starve. So there was no, hissy fits in the back seat, and if there were either dire consequences. My father would pull over and dole out justice, take that for whatever you want it for, or my mother would just simply say, I'm sorry, we're going home for supper, and that's all there is to it. And if you don't knock it off, you'll walk, and we will drive behind you to make sure you don't get lost. And he only had to pull the car. We didn't even get out. She just pulled the car over. Who's first? End of discussion. Now, that might work with some kids. It might not work with others. But the point was, there was no doubt about who's in charge. And in this case, the father is relinquishing his leadership not only to his children, but to the state. Because he's telling the state, these guys are breaking the law and making my job as a parent harder. No, you're making your job harder because you will not lay down the law to your children about who's going to eat what when. So
on a parental level, all of that is good, but this is on a larger scale. Okay, to go from the specifics of this particular case and bringing it into a more general sort of environment. This is a continuation of a trend that we have of making the government responsible for ensuring that the decisions that we make, or that we don't actually have to make difficult decisions, and the government is responsible for creating laws and enforcing laws that regulate our relationships with our neighbors, with our friends, with our families, with our co-workers, with our bosses, and with society in general. So here's an example, okay? Nick, if you and I are neighbors and something's going on, whatever, you're having a party because I know you're a big party person and the alcohol is flowing freely, okay? Hypothetically speaking.
Oh,
Nick,
this is hypothetical. Okay.
Okay, just going to be hypothetical. He's looking at me with this,
You're not supposed to tell stories outside the locker room, yeah.
Right, no.
Or the mess deck.
I was just going to say what goes on in the locker room
stays in the locker room. That's right.
Okay, let's take that off the table. So let's say it's 9:30 at night, and you're making a whole lot of noise, and I want to relax in that. So it used to be that I would go over, knock on the door, and say, Nick, we're friends. I just want to tell you I'm having a hard time relaxing. It's been a hard day. It's getting late. Can you turn the noise down a little bit? Used to be that I could do that. Used to be, Nick, that you would go, okay, yeah, we're neighbors, we're friends, we get along well. So, I come to you and treat you with respect and courtesy. You treat me with respect and courtesy. You go to your friends and say, hey, guys, let's keep it down. We're not going to keep it down. We're disturbing my neighbors. We're going to have to pull the plug on this party. That's the way that it used to be done. That's the way that it should be done. And that's the way that it would be done if we still had those kind of interpersonal skills the willingness to go out and talk to our neighbor and say, listen, politely and respectfully, I'm just letting you know this is really causing me some problems here. Can we turn the noise down? Relax, calm down a little bit, play a little bit of the Jim Watson relaxed background music there, and everybody calm down. So it takes a certain amount of self-confidence and appreciation or expectation that you, Nick, are going to be receptive to my request, and that you're not going to go, F off, get off my porch, or worse, take a swing at me, right? Or throw a beer bottle at me. So there was a certain amount of self-reliance and self-confidence, an initiative on my part, an expectation of respect and consideration on your part, and of course, I would have that expectation. It wouldn't be unreasonable for me to have that expectation because that's the kind of neighbor you would be, because neighbors are neighbors. It doesn't mean that every now and then there aren't bad apples, out there, but that's kind of the relationship it should be. But today, and then of course, if we do have a dispute and the dispute can't be settled, well, then if we have to go and adjudicate, go to court or whatever. And I don't know with that particular scenario that I've outlined how a adjudication would work, but if we had something that was something that could be adjudicated, then we would go to court. But now we don't do that anymore. We don't take responsibility. I don't pick up the phone and call you. I go knock on your door. I call the city by law enforcement. I call the police. I call whomever, and I go, Nick's breaking the law. So they send the police or they send the bylaw enforcement officers. Those are the ones that knock on your door. They don't just ask you to turn it down. They give you a citation. What it's done is we've created this whole society where it's not just that we're transferring our parental rights, or people like this father is relinquishing his parental responsibilities and rights to the state and making the state responsible for enforcing his authority within his own family. But we've done this across the board, where we've completely surrendered not just our rights but our responsibilities, because rights and responsibilities are balanced, okay?
Right. They're supposed
you can't
to be,
have one without the other. And we've surrendered all of these things. We've transferred all of this power to the state. And the consequence of that is that we are slowly losing our capacity to have these conversations, to manage our interpersonal relationships, and yes, even manage our interpersonal conflicts.
Well, again, it's not something I'm going to take a lot of issue with. I think it's what you're talking about is this case is a symptom of the problem you're describing, and on one level, it looks silly and foolish because when I'm looking at it, I'm thinking the man is surrendering his ability to be a parent effectively, not only to his children but to the state. I think that's a serious issue, but I can't argue with the points that you just made either, because it's not just the Happy Meal. It's every time you turn around. If you have an issue with your neighbor, there's very little of this. Now, it's in certain circumstances and in certain quarters, that is still very much alive. Because if you live out where the population is more sparse, first of all, you don't rub shoulders with your neighbor like you do here. Okay, when you're sitting in a subdivision, there might be 1,500 people within a quarter of a mile of you, and 1,493 of them you don't know. Even if they're your next door neighbors, the most you do is hi and you wave as you walk in and out, right? You never have any real interaction. Out in the larger areas with more room between each other, you don't bump into shoulders, but you know them. You run into them downtown. If there's a problem, you go over and try to help them out. Those kinds of things, and it's part of the reason why I prefer a more rural lifestyle. Because there's still some of that civility left. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to paint this as some kind of Norman Rockwell painting. You still have people that you'd rather not deal with in any segment of society, and some people would rather not deal with you.
But to interrupt, just to make the observation, Nick, that even if you don't want to deal with the person, or they don't want to deal with you. At some point in time, when you interact, you have to learn to deal with one another.
Oh, yeah.
Now, in a rural setting, as you're describing, it may be difficult or maybe easier to avoid one another. But irrespective of the ease or difficulty, when you do interact with one another,
right.
you do it in a practical, respectful, decent manner, and you solve the problem. And it's like, I'm making this example up. I haven't run into this problem personally, so I don't want any of my neighbors to think that I'm criticizing them. I'm not. It's a hypothetical situation. But I have seen this happen where somebody will be putting their trash out in the city, and for whatever reason, the trash, it's fallen over or something, a bag has fallen onto somebody else's driveway. And, instead of going out and picking up the bag yourself because you don't want somebody else's garbage blocking your driveway, you don't want anything blocking your driveway. So, a bag, a garbage pail in a strong wind got blown over.
Right. The
trash falls out into your driveway. It's not your garbage. So, the way it used to be, the way I would handle something like that is I'd go out and I'd pick up the garbage.
Right.
Okay. And if it was really a lot and overwhelming, I'd go knock on my neighbor's door and say, hey, Joe or Sam or Nick, the wind blew your garbage over. It's all over my driveway. I'm picking it up, but it's a lot. Come on out. Let's do it together. And my neighbor would come out and he would or she would do it. We'd do it together. But today, there are so many people that would look out the window, see the trash blown across the driveway and go, okay, the way to handle this is call the city.
Yeah.
Call
It's a
the
snitch
bylaw
mentality.
enforcement. Call somebody because my driveway is being violated and that's against the law. And I'm going to call the authorities report my neighbor for, unneighborliness because he didn't.
Well, this is
whatever.
Why, this is one of the ways that progressive governments intrude in your daily life. They depend on this snitch culture, where rather than going out and working it out between yourselves, they say, oh, you don't need to do that. What if the guy's a complete jerk? Well, what if he is? Okay, if he is, there's the courts. Like if you've got a neighbor, let's say they're continuously blowing snow into your driveway, and you go over and you do everything you can to be reasonable.
And that's a real issue with
Absolutely.
snowblowers and the climate we live in. It happens all the time.
Exactly. So that's why I'm using the example. So eventually you realize this guy just isn't going to quit. So you've got small claims courts. You could take him to small claims courts and say, look, Your Honor, all I want is for him to blow the snow the other way. Put it on his own lawn. I don't need, because now I got to move mine and his. And I've tried, and he just won't be reasonable. There's a way to deal with this that doesn't involve the state, other than at small Supreme Court, at that lowest court level. But the city, and I say the city, I'm talking about any city, tells people, don't bother with that. Let us handle it. Let us look after you. It's this cradle-to-grave mentality that people, they give up the intellectual integrity. They suffer from intellectual laziness, never think about what the long-term effect of that is, because not only are you doing it, but calling 311 or whatever the number is to call bylaw to rat out your neighbor, your kids are watching you, and they learn from you, even when you don't think they are. So what are you teaching them? There's a long-term ripple effect of this stuff that people don't stop and think about.
Right.
Because it's just part of their daily lives. They never realize or stop to think, what am I really doing?
Well, and I think this is exactly the problem. It's not just the substance of what we're talking about, but it's the long-term effects where we lose our capacity to be good and responsible neighbors. And that's a two-way street. Mm-hmm. And even if your neighbor is not reciprocating, you still have an obligation to be a responsible neighbor. And my experience with the kind of thing with the snow, for sure. I once was living in a place where we had shared driveways,
right,
where the houses were right up against one another,
right,
and it was a double driveway, mm-hmm. and on one side was my driveway, I parked my car, and on the other side, my neighbor parked his car. And in the wintertime, it was always a battle because, where are you pushing the snow and things like that? And of course, and our listeners, especially those who don't live in an environment where you get a lot of snow, a real issue is not just where you're putting the snow. It's not just a question of you shovel the snow and you shoveled it onto your neighbor's driveway, but where you shovel your snow and pile it up has an important effect on where the drift is.
Yes.
Okay, so just by the way you're piling your snow up, even if they're not piling the snow up on your driveway, the way where they position the pile and things like that, even if it's on their own property, can cause you tremendous difficulties with snow accumulation in your driveway because of the snow drift. So, and I'm not going to get into the mechanics of that, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if anyone's out there who lives in an area where there's a lot of snow or a fair amount of snow anyway, and wind, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
So Saskatchewan.
Except in Saskatchewan, the wind, the snow blows, but it never actually stops anywhere.
That's true. You got to have a tree or two to knock the snow down.
Right. So that's the thing is with drifting is you actually have to have a pile.
We love you, Saskatchewan.
We do, yes, and Manitoba, most of Manitoba.
Winnipeg. I mean,
and at least half of Alberta.
Yeah, at least half of Alberta, except that part that Rachel Notley lives in.
That would be the Fantasyland part of it.
That's right. That's the Fantasyland.
The Fantasyland part of the province of Alberta.
We're going to have to get our Western correspondent back on the air maybe next week, Roy, and get him in to talk about $13 oil. We've got a couple minutes left, and I know this isn't on the topics list, but can you imagine how well Trudeau's carbon tax is going over out there, when he seems to be doing everything he can to destroy their very, the heartbeat of their economy out there. This is the kind of thing, I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but this is the kind of thing that gets people talking about charting their own course and going their own way, if you get where I'm going.
Well, you can say it. There's always an independence movement in Alberta and in Quebec. Yeah. It's been a lot less strong in Alberta than it has been in Quebec, but for sure there's an independence movement. I don't know how strong it is now or if it'll ever grow into anything significant, but you're right. A country of this size and diverse, and not just geographically and culturally diverse, but economically diverse as well. And some of the things that the federal government does here is gratuitous. It alienates regions of the country, and for no reason, because exactly what we're talking about right now, Nick, this idea of being good neighbors. We don't have to have laws forcing people to act in a neighborly fashion in order for them to do that. And sometimes when you pass laws to force them, it ends up having the opposite effect.
Of course. It's in the world of training horses, we have what's called opposition reflex. You push on them, they push on you. And the harder you push on them, the harder they push back. And that's what we're seeing.
Okay, so we're going to go for a break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, I'm Joe, he's Nick. You are back in the combat zone. This is the fourth segment, the home stretch for Wednesday, November the 21st, in the middle of the first deep freeze of the winter season, and it's still 5 weeks before winter hits us. And Nick, hard for me to move away from winter to other environmental concerns, quote unquote. There's my air quotation marks.
Yeah, I see them.
But I was following a story the other day about a whale carcass that washed up on shore in Indonesia, and when they started to, I almost said dismantle, but that would probably not be the correct word to use in this case. When they started to carve up the whale carcass, they discovered a lot of plastic garbage in the gut, intestines, stomach. I don't know the anatomy of whales, but and it's interesting, because they said they found more than 1,000 plastic items inside of this whale. They emphasized in the news story that I read that nobody was suggesting that these items led to or contributed to the death of this particular whale. Okay, which was honest of them, but it begged the question, what's your point then of writing the story? Because to me, it was only a story if they were going to allege that the
plastic killed it.
The plastic had contributed to the whale's death. I'm not really sure. I can picture these guys on the beach carving up this whale and going, and I know they don't speak English there, but oh my God, look at all this plastic. Quick, let's count every item.
That's right.
Okay.
Somebody had to make that call.
723 straws, 240 bottles, and somebody had to count this stuff. So I doubt very much the number of over 1,000. But let's say that, in fairness, that they were being honest and it's significant.
Yes, I think
so. We're all waiting now, okay, for the next round of ban the plastic straws from your restaurant here in Ottawa to hit. And I say that because I've noticed that when I go into a restaurant to order a drink, that they're no longer bringing my glass of ice water out with a plastic straw. They used to do this all the time.
Right.
It was just a standard thing. Everything came with a straw. But now you have to ask for it. And I think you and I were together at a place recently where we asked for drinks. And when they brought the drinks, they didn't bring any straws. And we're not going to mention the name of the place. But when we asked, the waitress actually told us. We were talking about it. And I said to this waitress, I said, here in Ottawa, plastic straws, like all of your trash, none of it ends up in the ocean anywhere. It all ends up in landfill. And she didn't know that, which is really funny because I'm thinking, okay, just picture this, okay? Picture that there are people in the city of Ottawa who think, because this is the only way it would have to work, of course they probably haven't thought at all, but if they did think, they would have to picture that somebody takes the plastic bottles from the back of the restaurant, goes over to the Ottawa River, dumps the plastic bottles into the Ottawa River, and then watches them, maybe even waving, okay, as the bottles float down the river, make their way eventually to the St. Lawrence River, and then eventually to the Gulf of St. Lawrence and out to the Atlantic Ocean. And perhaps, if they get far enough out, they get caught in the Gulf Stream, and behold, they make their way all the way up to the British Isles and beyond. So at some point in time, the bottles from restaurants in the city of Ottawa are at some point in time going to be discovered in the Orkney Islands.
Oh my God. Yeah, or they think that the straws somehow can transport themselves across the country, drop into the Pacific Ocean, float all the way across the Pacific with all the wind and all the turbulence that the oceans are famous for, end up in and around Bangladesh and contribute to the death of this whale by ingesting all that plastic.
Indonesia in this case.
Indonesia is what I meant. Yes, you're right. So it's like, this is the kind of thinking that allows really dumb ideas to take place.
Like Barack Obama's idea that perhaps climate change is not being adequately addressed because of our anger, racist, and mommy issues.
Yes, exactly. Don't get me started on that again.
Don't get you started on that again.
Oh God, I just recovered. What are you talking about? Anyway, but why is it that people I know life becomes automatic, especially when you're in this, and I'm not picking on the service industry because you see this in every facet of life. Life becomes automatic, and the little things that you do every day are almost from muscle memory. Like if you get up in the morning, how many of us have gone out to the car, driven to work, and can't remember the trip? And yet here we are, safe. Okay? It's all muscle memory. Their mind's 1,000 miles away, but they know they can pilot their car safely through traffic without ever thinking about it. They never stop to think, well, okay, now I push in the clutch. Now I move the lever from first to second. Now I let the clutch out. Now I put some gas on.
Well, maybe what's happening is that people think that's what's happening to the straws, that they're just ending up there and they just don't know how they get there.
I think that's exactly what happens. They never get. It's like if you go to a grocery store, how many people, when they look at a steak, will say, okay, that started out as a calf, and some farmer fed it and raised it to about 1,100 pounds. Then he put it in a truck, and he took it to a slaughterhouse, and they killed it, and they skinned it, and they gutted it, and they hung it up for a number of days, and then they cut it up, and they put it on these little plastic trays, wrapped it in saran wrap, and sent it to the grocery store.
Right, and then afterwards somebody eats it.
That's right.
And then they throw that plastic wrap somewhere in the garbage,
and it ends up in the guts of
it ends up in Moby Dick's gut in Indonesia.
Right. They don't stop and think about the process.
Well, it's okay. So let's just be clear about this one important overriding fact. Okay, it's pointless banning straws in North America or water bottles or any of that stuff, because none of that stuff goes in the ocean. Unless you're living in New York City, or you're living in Seattle, or you're living in San Francisco, or any other one of those far left weird metropolitan areas on either the east or the west coast. And some of that might end up going out into the ocean. But as I've said before, okay, if that's a problem, some of those municipalities may in fact dump some of their trash out in the ocean using the trash or the garbage barges
cow.
or scows, right? So I don't know that that's the case, but before you ban straws in Ottawa or Toronto or Indianapolis or Cincinnati, or Jacksonville,
take your pick.
Find out what your own city is doing, and if in fact they're dumping plastic refuse in the ocean, stop doing it. I mean, that's the answer. The answer is not to ban straws. The answer is to stop dumping straws in the ocean.
Well, I've been through this before, but there is a way to deal with this. It's called incineration.
Well, of course, but nobody wants to talk about incineration anymore.
Well, you'd be surprised how many people want to talk about it, but the political leadership doesn't.
Well, in some places they don't. In some places they will talk about it, and we know that and there are jurisdictions where they are incinerating, and it's a very effective way of getting rid of garbage. Well, it's very environmentally friendly. But for whatever reason, there are jurisdictions where, for political reasons, the leaders, elected leaders of these jurisdictions will simply not entertain the idea of having incineration of garbage because they just buy into this whole unscientific, mythology that incineration causes pollution.
The other side of the coin, another facet, not the other side of the coin, but another facet of this is that people will watch TV and they'll see this horrific scene of this gutted whale and a heap of plastic beside it, and they'll go, "Oh my God, that looks just like the Pepsi bottle I bought yesterday. I can't believe that got all the way over there. Kill that whale." The point is that they feel guilty about something they have nothing to do with. So they react emotionally. And there's certain segments of our society who feed on that.
Now, I'm going to introduce a topic that's related to this that's going to astonish many, many of our listeners. And it has to do with recycling. because, recycling is all the craze these days. You have to have, at least here in Ottawa, you have to have your blue box, and you have to have your black box, and you have to have your green bin, and we're no different. Everybody's got their version of the blue box, the black box, and the green bin, okay? And the whole idea is we have to recycle, we have to recycle, we have to recycle.
Yes.
Now, Nick, you and I are old enough to remember or to know, and I'm astonished that more people don't point this out, but I'm going to point it out now. We are old hands experts at recycling if you're 50 years old and older.
Yep.
Because we grew up in a time when milk bottles were plastic. There were plastic milk bottles.
Yep.
But there were glass milk bottles.
Yep.
Soda all came in not in plastic bottles. All came in.
Well, we used to get cases of pop from the pop shop.
In glass bottles. Okay. And we paid a small deposit when we bought those drinks, including milk. And we would return all of those things to the store. The store would collect them, return our deposits, and then the manufacturer, the bottler, or the dairy company would collect all of those used bottles, clean and sterilize them, and reuse them.
Right.
That was not a recycling program. That was just the normal way that we did it. So we understand recycling. We didn't recycle. We weren't recycling to, quote unquote, save the environment or save the whales or anything like that. We just recycled because it made economic sense for us for these companies to recycle, and that was just the way it was done. And how many times, I don't know if you ever did this, Nick, but when we were young and we wanted to raise money for a particular thing, an activity with our little group, if we had a Scouts or Cubs or Girl Guides or whatever, although I was never a Girl Guide.
Well, you could be today.
Apparently so. But whatever the cause was, or for school, if you wanted to have a class trip.
Right.
Okay. So what we would do is we would go from door to door. We would take on a weekend or whatever, knock on the doors, and we would ask, do you have any spare bottles? Mm-hmm. And people would give the bottles.
Yes, bottle drive.
It's called a bottle drive.
Right.
And then, so we would collect as many bottles as we could. We'd go to the local store. We'd drop the bottles off. They would give us the deposit back. That would be the money we would use for whatever the activity was.
Right.
And we might do this over a period of time because it would take time to accumulate
enough money
for whatever the activity was that we had to pay for. And all of these bottles were reused over and over and over again. And the same thing, milk would be delivered, okay, or you could pick up milk still in the store in plastic jugs, and you would return the jugs or the glass bottles. Or if you were having your milk delivered, which we had, the bottle would the milk delivery people would, the milkman we call them, would leave the milk bottle out. Although in the wintertime he could. We had an unheated porch,
right?
And he'd drive up the lane, and then he'd get out. He'd have to come in the unheated. In the wintertime, we had a refrigerator on the unheated porch
to keep it from freezing.
That's right. He had to put it in the fridge to prevent it from freezing out on the unheated porch. It was kind of funny that way. But anyway, he would collect the empty bottles that we would leave on the stoop, and take them back. And, of course, they would be, again, sterilized and reused. So this whole thing about how recycling is new, the answer is it's not new. This is what we used to do, and we didn't have to have recycle centers because it was the manufacturer themselves, the bottlers themselves, that reused these bottles. Well, I don't understand. This is a legitimate question, and I know I'm hogging the mic here, Mike. I'm hogging the mic here, Mike, Nick, Mike, Joe, Sam.
I don't care what you call me.
I'm having a brain freeze here or something like that. I don't know what it is. I don't understand why we don't do that. I don't understand why bottling companies don't just reuse the bottles rather than disposing of them and then bringing in new ones. Unless you're telling me that it costs more to recycle those bottles than it does to purchase new
Well, how
ones.
many things do you buy in glass? You don't buy milk that way.
No, but
You don't buy water that way.
No, but we used to.
I know we used to, but there's a very good reason why they don't, and that is a glass empty milk jug, a 1 quart milk jug, is a lot heavier than a plastic bag holding 1 quart of milk. It was weight that was the key. The difference between the gross.
Yeah, no, but you're talking about bags.
Yeah, I know, but I'm using.
But don't forget that for a long time you can still get them plastic milk
Same
jugs.
story. When you have what you're trying to do as part of your transportation network, is to reduce every ounce of weight that you carry that is not product.
Right.
Is lost to you.
Okay, I get it.
So there were 2 driving factors, as I understand it. Number 1, glass is heavier than plastic, so we go with plastic. There was a cry for reducing of packaging, okay? As this whole revolution about the environment started to kick in, why do you think we went to plastic when we moved away from paper bags? Because we wanted to save the trees, right? So we moved to plastic.
Yes, I understand that, but we're talking bottles.
Yeah, I know that. But but it's the general attitude at the time that made this transition possible.
Right.
It was mostly, though, the weight of the actual physical container. That the lighter you could make it without, losing too much in spoilage or spillage, then that was better for the company. It was better for their bottom line. And when you had to put 28 skids or 24 skids on a truck and ship it halfway across the country,
I understand all of that. I get it.
That was what killed the glass bottle industry.
Okay, but the glass bottles were replaced by plastic bottles.
True, but they were still heavier than a plastic bag.
Yeah, but you have to. But it doesn't matter in the case of soft drinks, of soda pop. They're still using the plastic bottle. So it's not like they replaced the plastic bottle with a plastic bag.
True. That's true.
Which is what they did
with
milk.
They can't go any lighter with a plastic bottle for pop because you pressurize it.
Okay, so then why not reuse the same bottle?
Because or
in the case of milk, you can still get plastic milk jugs.
Yes, but not nearly like you can with
and forget about the plastic milk jug, because I can get a gallon or whatever it is. It's a 4-liter milk jug.
That's a gallon.
Okay.
Or almost a gallon.
It's, okay, but it used to be a gallon, but now it's 4 liters. I can still get a 4-liter plastic milk jug, which is the same design as the old gallon plastic milk jug. And the gallon plastic milk jug was recyclable, but the 4-liter milk jug that we're using now, they don't recycle it. Well, no, They do recycle it, but they recycle it telling you, throw it in the recycle bin so we can take it to the recycle center.
Right.
And then do whatever we do with it to recycle center.
They melt it down.
Okay, rather than just returning it to the dairy to be sterilized and reused. And that's not under pressure, so what do we care whether the plastic breaks down or not from an integrity point of view?
You're making a good point there. I can't answer that. I don't know. But I do know that ultimately the best thing to do with plastic is not to bother recycling it in the first place. It's to burn it, because plastic is nothing but hardened gasoline. So if we can take it and extract the energy that it contains, we don't have to recycle anything as far as recycling in the sense that we understand it now, because burning it and extracting its energy is certainly far better than the energy it takes to put it on another truck, send it to whether it goes back to the bottling plant to be sterilized, because there's energy that goes into water for the sterilization process. You've got to, you got to weed out the ones that are too badly damaged to use again. So there's a certain product loss that they have to go through. All this stuff all plays into it. I think that if it was up to me, we would take anything made of plastic, would go in the furnace. You'd grind it up into almost like a powder and burn it at very high temperatures. Glass, you could do the same thing with. There's a reason you want the glass. I'm not going to get into the how the whole thing works, but the bottom line is we could save the taxpayer hundreds of millions of dollars a year if we ended recycling as we know it, and the environment would be better off for it.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. the answer to the recycling dilemma.
And at least as I see it.
But let's come back full circle, okay?
Okay.
Look, let's just go back to the plastic and Moby Dick, okay?
Yeah,
look,
poor old
guys.
Moby.
Okay, no, I mean, we're making light of it, and I don't want to make light of it. It really it looks awful. It makes people feel awful. Why people would throw their plastic, why people would throw their garbage out helter-skelter, I don't know. But the bottom line is this, okay, that whatever straws made it into the nostril of that turtle, and you remember that was an example that waitress cited in the store. She was saying, yeah, I saw that. Okay, that didn't come from Ottawa. It doesn't come from Toronto. It doesn't come from
Hamilton or
Hamilton.
Windsor,
It doesn't
any of these
come
places.
from Chicago. It doesn't come from Kansas City. You know, it doesn't come from Toledo, or maybe
And it certainly didn't come from Des Moines.
So you know what I'm saying, guys? There has to be a reasonable, sensible response. And if you had just pause, it's impossible for me to conceive of a population so abysmally, profoundly ignorant of basic geography that they don't understand that the garbage that they throw out in their kitchen on a daily basis does not end up in the ocean. Maybe it ends up in a landfill. Okay, well, not maybe, it definitely, or it's incinerated in some places, but it's not causing whatever you see in the news about a whale that's a dead whale that washed ashore in Indonesia. I promise you that if you're listening to this show, unless you come from Indonesia or one of the island nations in that general vicinity, where it's entirely possible that garbage is dumped in the ocean.
That's right.
Okay, then you don't have a problem. Banning straws in North America is a pointless,
Bad idea.
It's all about giving yourself a pat on the back and going to bed at night feeling like you're doing something for the environment when in fact you're doing nothing for the environment.
You know, that's the kind of thing that drives me crazy, is when people do things for emotional satisfaction to assuage their own guilt.
But they truly believe that as a practical matter they're having an effect, that it's helping, and it's not. And as a consequence of substituting real practical measures for ephemeral emotional satisfaction, in the end you end up not actually doing anything for the environment. So it's actually worse, because the things that you are doing and feeling very good about, in fact, are not having an effect whatsoever. Zero, okay? Listen up, people. Zero effect. Banning straws in North America has zero positive environmental impact in Indonesia.
And what it does, in my case, is it makes me ask for 2 straws, not 1. Or 3 straws, not 2. Because I got to make up for all the ones that people didn't order.
Nick, you're such a cynic.
Not a cynic. I'm just don't believe this crap. And when people fall for it, I got to counter that somehow.
Okay, there's a pregnant pause.
Yeah. We're looking at each other going, who talks next?
Who talks next?
Who talks next? There's a saying in sales, when you reach a certain point in the negotiation, he who talks next loses.
I've heard that said.
Yes. I'm not talking about us.
I'm not sure that works on a talk show there.
No, it doesn't. No, dead air is not a good thing. It's actually a bad thing. It's like waiting for a Twitter from your favorite mayor.
A tweet.
A tweet from your favorite mayor.
Except that in the case of our illustrious mayor in Ottawa, you don't actually have to wait.
No, that's true. It's remarkable how fast. You'd think a guy, and I guess we didn't quite lead the show off with this, but it is a good way to wrap it up. A man with a city of a million people, okay, and is one of the largest geographical cities in the country, would have more to do than to sit and respond to tweets from former talk show hosts who used to be on the radio that he doesn't like. You would think he'd have something, like maybe take a shovel, go fill in a pothole. I don't know. Go do something useful. Sweep the street.
Okay, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of the show. So we thank you very much for listening. Comments at thecombatzone.ca if you want to send us a comment. And tell your friends and neighbors and all of those guys about the show. We want them to listen in next week.
Okay, we'll see you all again next week.